More than 100 people have been killed in Colombia after a 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck the western part of the country. The death toll is likely to rise as rescuers continue to search damaged buildings, while the country has declared a state of emergency. U.S. President Donald Trump is demanding that Iran pay compensation for all of the people that they have killed and wounded. This comes after Iran itself called for its own compensation for war damages, as well as an end to U.S. sanctions and military threats before the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Russia is preparing to deploy more North Korean troops and that it has received additional ballistic missiles from Pyongyang. He also said Moscow could no longer sustain its war without support from North Korea. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. We begin today with a deadly earthquake in Colombia. Rescue workers are racing to reach people trapped beneath collapsed buildings after an earthquake struck the west of the country. The powerful tremor has killed more than 100 people and damaged hospitals, airports, and hundreds of homes. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
Colombia has declared a national state of emergency after its deadliest earthquake in a decade killed at least 111 people. The magnitude 7.4 quake struck the west of the country on Monday morning. Its epicenter was near San Jose del Palma in the remote Chocó region. At least 87 other people were injured, and around 1,600 buildings were damaged, including at least 61 that completely collapsed. Pereira and Cali were among the hardest hit cities, where residents joined rescuers searching for people beneath the rubble.
The damage is huge, lots of injured, definitely some deaths, I already know of some. Now we wait that those who can help, not only us, but the most vulnerable, should do it, because it is part of the humanism we all should have.
Hospitals and emergency facilities were damaged. Several airports also suspended operations for structural inspections. Communications were disrupted in the Chocó region, complicating efforts to assess the destruction and reach isolated communities.
I thought, well, let's wait for it to pass. But we saw that the magnitude was too strong. So we searched for a place where we knew was solid ground here in the square. I think that if it had lasted 5 more seconds, there wouldn't be anything left. I think we really reached the limit of resistance.
The earthquake was felt across Colombia and in neighboring Ecuador and Panama. At least 21 aftershocks were recorded by late Monday, with further tremors possible. Rescue teams are searching collapsed buildings as authorities warn the death toll could rise. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump is demanding compensation from Iran, adding a new condition to negotiations over reopening the Strait of Hormuz. The demand comes after Tehran issued its own call for war damages and a U.S. troop withdrawal. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday demanded that Iran pay compensation for people he says were killed in wars, attacks, and protests, adding a new condition that could further complicate efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, they asked for reparations, you might say, or they asked for money for the damage that we've done. I said, that's a good idea. Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. Whether you go SS Cole or whether you go all of the people that were so badly hurt, so badly wounded or killed, many thousands of people.
Trump's comments come after Iran's own calls for compensation and an end to U.S. sanctions. The issue emerged after negotiations between Iran and Oman over the weekend. Tehran said it would not agree to reopen the Strait of Hormuz unless Washington meets several conditions, including compensation for war damage and the withdrawal of U.S. troops. In a post on Truth Social on Monday, Trump also responded by saying Iran should instead compensate the families of Americans and others killed in conflicts and attacks linked to Tehran. He also called for payments to the families of what he described as innocent protesters killed by Iran's ruling regime over the past half-century. Trump said the compensation requirement will now be added to future negotiations. At least 18 U.S. service members have been killed in Middle East attacks connected to the U.S. war with Iran since the conflict began more than 5 months ago. Iran presented 6 conditions to the United States on Saturday, declaring that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until its demands are met. 이승재, Arirang News.
The U.S. State Department says it has revoked more than 175,000 visas from foreign nationals under President Donald Trump's administration as Washington continues its sweeping immigration crackdown. The department says most revocations followed encounters with law enforcement, with assault, driving under the influence, theft, and drug offenses among the leading reasons. Officials say visas were also revoked from foreign nationals accused of serious crimes and immigration fraud, as well as those who threatened U.S. citizens or posed national security risks. In one example, a U.S. embassy in North Africa revoked more than 100 visas from so-called birth tourists, parents accused of traveling to the United States primarily to give birth so their children could obtain U.S. citizenship. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Russia is preparing to deploy more North Korean troops and has received additional ballistic missiles from Pyongyang. In a video address on Monday, Zelenskyy claimed Moscow could no longer sustain its war without North Korean support. A day earlier, he said as many as 50,000 North Korean troops could eventually be stationed in Russia, up from an earlier estimate of 30,000. Ukraine's military intelligence separately told Reuters that a roughly 90-member North Korean missile unit was deploying to Russia's Voronezh region. It could operate 6 launchers and up to 120 missiles. Neither Moscow nor Pyongyang have responded to the allegations. And Korea's defense ministry says it will pursue a plan to temporarily relocate functions of Gwangju Air Base to other military airfields by mid-2028. Tuesday's announcement comes a day after President Lee Jae-myung ordered officials to make the site available as soon as possible for a planned semiconductor cluster in the country's southwestern region. The ministry also said it'll work to minimize the impact on security and military readiness. Gwangju is also a joint South Korea-U.S. base where American air power can be deployed in times of crisis. The ministry said it will consult with Washington to speed up the return of land provided to U.S. Forces Korea. In the southern city of Busan, a specialized complex facilitates Korea's supply chain for power semiconductors. Our An Sung-jin is there to see how these companies create a part of the ecosystem.
Korea is a powerhouse for semiconductors, and when people think of the industry, names like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix usually come to mind. Yet behind the country's global competitiveness is a vast network of smaller equipment, components, and materials companies that strengthen domestic chip supply chains. This company, with around 80 employees, specializes in power semiconductors, but it doesn't make the final product just yet. It produces copper clips for power semiconductors that facilitates the efficient flow of both electricity and heat while improving electrical and thermal performance. Based on the design tailored for each customer, these copper molds are printed, inspected, and packaged for export, which take up 90% of their products. Imagine building a house. The power semiconductor is the house itself. Copper clips act like its steel frame. This company makes the steel frame and the specialized construction machine that joins the steel frame together, bonding copper for better stress operation.
In power semiconductors, the choice of materials is critical as it significantly affects performance and final output. The clip material we manufacture is not only used in electric vehicles, but also in NVIDIA's data centers, where we have recently seen significant increase in orders.
Power semiconductors are different from conventional chips. And as demand grows for electric vehicles, renewable energy, and data centers, so does the need for power semiconductors that can operate more efficiently and manage heat. Busan's Power Semiconductor Specialized Complex is the only complex of its kind in Korea. The city is working to build a local ecosystem around power semiconductors, particularly in materials, components, and equipment, as it looks to further broaden the scope of the initiative by expanding programs like training specialized talent.
The Korean semiconductor market has traditionally been dominated by memory semiconductors.
However, we can differentiate ourselves as the power semiconductor remains an essential component, and in the long term, our goal is to establish an integrated public-private foundry cluster that can support companies.
And that's why the country continues to strengthen its policy support for the power semiconductor supply chain with initiatives to further enhance competitiveness. The push comes as the global power semiconductor industry enters another period of strong demand. But Korea's competitiveness will depend on more than its biggest chip makers, as the smaller companies supplying the materials, components, and equipment behind them will play an even bigger part. An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Busan.
As BTS continues its Arirang World Tour, North American cities are making special efforts to welcome the group. In the Canadian city of Toronto, part of a major street will be temporarily renamed BTS Boulevard. Landmarks will be lit in BTS signature purple, and the city has proposed labeling the concert dates as BTS Weekend. In the United States, Baltimore International Airport has set up a special welcome area for visiting fans. And revenue at nearby hospitality businesses and Korean cultural venues has surged, as more than 157,000 fans gathered earlier this month in New Jersey and around 340,000 in Las Vegas in May for BTS concerts. BTS has also drawn support from global leaders, with Mexico's president hosting the group at the National Palace and France's president sharing footage from the BTS Paris concerts on social media. As many people flock to beaches and valleys to escape the relentless heat, authorities are urging them to beware of the risk of accidental drowning. In the southern city of Ulsan, officials are checking that high-tech rescue equipment is ready for emergencies. Our Tae Young reports.
A person is struggling in the water, waiting for rescue. First, a drone takes off to pinpoint the exact location and assess the situation. An unmanned rescue board, remotely controlled from the beach, cuts through high waves and strong winds. Meanwhile, a rescue worker on a jet ski arrives and he rescues the person using the board.
It can approach those in need of rescue, even in dangerous water environments, scattered with tetrapods, hidden rocks, and rocky coastlines. It is currently serving as the core rescue equipment for the rescue team at Jinnah Beach.
With warnings of exceptionally severe natural disasters this summer, such as sweltering heat, heavy rain, and typhoons, Ulsan City has launched inspections to check its disaster rescue response system and improve on-site response capabilities. City officials visited a fire station to check the status of water rescue equipment, including unmanned submersibles. It is hoped that this inspection of equipment and rescue capabilities will help keep the people of Ulsan safe this summer. Cha Eun-kyung, Arirang News.
Hot weather has always been good news for the alcoholic drinks industry, but new research says that's only true up to a point. Once temperatures climb high enough, people start reaching for something else. Our Kim Sa-young tells us more.
On a warm day, a cold drink feels like the perfect match. And for a long time, that's exactly what the numbers showed. As it gets hotter, people buy more alcohol. But researchers at the University of California, ETH Zurich, and North Carolina State University have found the limit. Around 32 degrees Celsius, just over 89 Fahrenheit, the trend starts to reverse.
One, you want to be cool, kind of cool yourself down, but you don't, in those instances, want the effect of alcohol, which is just sort of elevates body temperature and sort of makes it less pleasant.
When it's extremely hot, some people choose comfort over a cold pint. But that doesn't mean pubs go quiet. It just means people show up for a different reason. At this pub in London, staff says a cool room can be just as big a draw as good weather outside.
Actually, we don't have a beer garden over here, but we do have an aircon. So that was one of the reasons that was pulling the customers in.
So heat or no heat, people still find a reason to walk through the door. For others, though, the heat changes the whole mood of the day. A regular customer at the bar says on the hottest afternoons, he'd rather rest than have a drink.
Because it just makes you docile, tired, not with it. You just don't want the afternoon to exist because you just want to sleep.
Health experts agree. Alcohol can add to dehydration and raise body heat, so it's not always the best choice on the hottest days. Drink makers have noticed too. Companies like Carlsberg say they are offering more low and no alcohol beers, so people still have something to enjoy. Kim Seoyoung, Arirang News.
This is the world now. Off the coast of Oman, oil from a stranded tanker has spread across almost 400 square kilometers of a protected marine reserve. The Omani government said on Monday that the tanker Zelenskyy ran into trouble in early June and has been stuck near the Halaniyat Islands ever since. It was carrying close to 1 million barrels of Russian crude bound for Asia. Security sources say there were signs that an explosion had damaged the ship. The oil slick now sits within about 7 kilometers of the coast. The Zelenskyy is part of Russia's shadow fleet of aging tankers and is under European sanctions. In the United States, President Donald Trump signed an order on Monday calling for childhood vaccinations to be spread out across separate doctors' visits. The order, which goes against the advice of doctors' groups, asks the health department to offer the measles, mumps, and rubella shot as 3 separate injections. Trump again suggested vaccines may be behind rising autism rates despite decades of studies finding no link between them. The American Academy of Pediatrics says the latest order spreads fear and confusion. Doctors warn that delaying shots leaves children exposed to preventable diseases for longer. In Europe, this summer's heat and drought could wipe out most of the growth the European Union expected this year, according to a report published Saturday by the Dutch bank Triodos. The bank puts the damage at about 1% of the bloc's output, which is worth roughly $208 billion. Most of the figure is due to workers getting less done in the heat. France looks like being the worst hit, as repeated heat waves could push its economy into a contraction this year. The European Commission had forecast EU growth of 1.1%. In the United States, jury selection has begun in the murder trial over the killing of rap legend Tupac Shakur 30 years after he was shot in Las Vegas. Prosecutors say 63-year-old Dwayne Davis organized the drive-by shooting. He has pleaded not guilty. Under Nevada law, he can be convicted even if he did not fire the gun. Tupac was 25 years old at the height of his rap career and known for his inspirational lyrics. The case went cold for nearly 3 decades until Davis began talking publicly about being involved in the crime. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
It is still hot in the afternoon, but the humidity has settled and we can breathe a little easier in the mornings and evenings. Most of the heat wave warnings have lifted, but an advisory remains in place for the capital area and western regions. And thanks to northeasterly winds, much of the Gangwon-do province will stay below 30 degrees Celsius. Most of the country will turn sunny as the day goes on, bringing plenty of strong sunshine, boosting UV levels to very high levels across much of the country. So keep the sunscreen and water bottle close. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 34 degrees Celsius, but eastern regions will have much more comfortable temperatures at 31 degrees in Busan and Daegu. The extreme heat has eased, but we are not out of the woods yet. Afternoon temperatures will remain around 34 degrees through the weekend here in the capital, and more rain is expected along the East Coast from tomorrow.
Now that's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.